Okay, let's go.
All right, so I know you're a cricket fan, and you're probably pretty intrigued by all this talk about a brand new World Test Championship format. We're going to take a deep dive into this article from Howzat Cricket called Transforming Test Cricket, World Test Championship Division Format. It's by Tushar Kukreja. And let me tell you, it's not just like a little tweak here and there. This thing's a complete overhaul with 2 divisions and promotion and relegation, even a whole playoff system. Sounds kind of like football, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah. And I think what's really interesting is why the author thinks this kind of drastic change is necessary. He points out, Test cricket's facing some challenges these days. That the schedules are jam-packed. It's tough to, fit in all these meaningful series. And then, of course, the popularity of T20 cricket, that's definitely put some pressure on this longer format.
So it's not just about making Test cricket more exciting. It's about actually making sure it survives, in this crazy world of cricket that's always changing. Okay, so let's break down this 2-division system.
All right, so the author's idea is you split the top 12 test-playing nations into 2 divisions. Division 1 would have the big names, the heavyweights like India, Australia, England, South Africa, New Zealand, and Sri Lanka.
So the usual suspects, basically. And what about Division 2? Who are we talking about there? The up-and-comers?
Exactly, yeah. Division 2 would have Pakistan, Bangladesh, West Indies, Ireland, Zimbabwe, and Afghanistan, all hungry to prove themselves and, try to get up there with the big boys.
Yeah, I bet. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, though, this whole promotion and relegation thing. It's like this constant battle for the top spot with teams moving up and down, based on how they play. Tell me more about how that works.
All right, so the author pictures like a 2-year cycle. In year 1, teams play within their division. So Division 1 plays Division 1, Division 2 plays Division 2. But then at the end of the year, things get spicy. We get the promotion and relegation playoffs. Picture this. The bottom 2 teams from Division 1 have to face off against the top 2 teams from Division 2. And it's a single-match playoff at a neutral venue.
Oh, wow. So it all comes down to that one match that's high stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the article even gives some examples of what these matchups could look like. Imagine Sri Lanka fighting to stay in Division 1 against a Pakistan team that's, really coming into their own. Or think about New Zealand having to fend off Bangladesh, who have been, really impressive lately.
Man, that's what I love about this idea. It creates so many new stories and possibilities. It's not just the same old teams at the top every single year.
Exactly. It brings that unpredictability back into Test cricket, That excitement, I think, is missing right now. And then in year 2, you got your new divisions all sorted out, and everyone's battling it out for a spot in that World Test Championship final.
All right, so we got the divisions, the promotion relegation drama, and then that ultimate prize, the WTC final. Yeah. But what about the actual matches themselves? Like, are we still talking about 5-day matches, best of 3 series? How does that all work?
So the author is suggesting some changes to how those series are structured as well. He's really adamant about this. Every series has to have a clear winner, no more drawn series.
So you're saying it's only 1, 3, or 5-match series only. I mean, that definitely adds a lot more pressure to each match, knowing there has to be a winner in the end. I can see how that would ramp up the intensity.
Exactly. Yeah. Every match really matters, but he also, acknowledges the importance of tradition. So those iconic series like the Ashes and the Border Gavaskar Trophy, those would stay as 5-match contests.
Oh, good. I wouldn't want to see those get shortened.
Yeah, but the standard series, those would be reduced to 3 matches. And this actually helps in a couple ways. First, it makes them easier to fit into the busy international schedule. And second, it means more teams get to play each other.
I like that. Keeps things fresh.
Yeah.
Gives more teams a chance to, really show what they can do. So every team would be guaranteed at least 3 series per year then.
Yep, at least 3, 1 at home, 1 away, and then at least 1 against the top 3 team in their division. No hiding from the big boys.
I love that that's a great way to keep things competitive and make sure fans get to see the best teams play each other regularly.
Absolutely. All right, are you ready to get a little nerdy?
Always. What's next?
The rating system, that's how teams are ranked, and ultimately how it's decided who gets promoted and relegated.
Okay, I'm all ears.
This is where it gets really interesting. The author actually takes inspiration from chess and tennis rankings. It's a dynamic system where your rating changes based on wins and losses, but also on the strength of your opponent.
So it's not just as simple as, who won the most matches.
Right. Like beating a higher ranked team, especially if you're playing them on their home turf, that's going to give you a bigger boost than, beating a lower-ranked team at home, and of course losing to a lower-ranked team that's going to hurt your rating a lot more.
That makes sense. It adds a whole new level of strategy to the game. So tell me, how does this rating system actually work? Where do teams start?
So every team starts off with a rating of 1,000 points. And then after each match, points are exchanged based on a formula that takes into account the result of the match, the relative strength of the two teams, and whether the match was played at home, away, or at a neutral venue.
So even if you lose a close match to a top team, it's not necessarily a disaster for your ranking.
Exactly. The system takes into account, how tough the challenge was and adjusts the points accordingly. And speaking of adjustments, there are also bonus points to consider.
Bonus points, tell me more.
Yeah, so teams can earn extra points for achieving certain milestones, things like winning a series, winning an away series, pulling off a clean sweep, those kinds of things.
So there's even more incentive to really dominate those matches. I'm really starting to see how this new format could really shake things up in Test cricket, make it a lot more exciting. But I'm also curious, what could go wrong with this system? What are the potential downsides?
That's a great question, and it's something the author actually addresses in his article. We should definitely dive into those arguments next. So one potential drawback is this idea of, dead rubber matches.
Dead rubbers. So for those who might not be super familiar with all the cricket lingo, a dead rubber is basically a match that doesn't really affect the outcome of the whole series. It's like when one team's already won the series no matter what happens in that last match.
Exactly. And the worry is with this new format, where points and rankings are so important, some teams might end up in a situation where they've got no chance of promotion, or they're definitely not going to make it to the final, and so those last few matches become dead rubbers. And the concern is that teams might not, they might not try as hard. They might field a weaker team.
I see, yeah. It would be a shame if a system that's supposed to make every match matter ends up making some matches not matter at all.
Yeah, and another potential issue is how this might affect player development.
Oh, how so?
Well, some people are saying this two-division system could create a bigger gap between the top teams in Division 1 and everyone else. Imagine if you have the same, 5 or 6 teams in Division 1 year after year.
Yeah, then it becomes really hard for players from those Division 2 nations to break into that top level and really test themselves against the best.
Exactly, and it could also lead to, more money and resources going to those already powerful cricketing nations.
So it's like this format is trying to make things more competitive and exciting, but it could actually end up making things more unequal.
That's the worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike.
Now, the author does talk about some ways to prevent these problems. Like, he says every team has to play at least one series against the top 3 team in their division. So even those lower-ranked teams get a shot at the big guys.
Yeah, and the bonus point system, that also helps because, it rewards teams for those big wins no matter what division they're in. But whether those things are enough to, really solve those problems, that's still up for debate.
Right. And what about the money side of things? Like, would this new format be financially sustainable for all the cricket boards and the players?
Well, the author argues that this format could actually bring in more money for Test cricket overall, because every match is more important now. So TV deals and sponsorships could become more valuable, which would benefit everyone.
Yeah, especially with all the drama of promotion and relegation.
Yeah.
I could see that attracting more viewers and more sponsors.
Exactly. But then again, some critics are saying that those smaller cricket boards, especially the ones in Division 2, they might have trouble, making as much money as those bigger, more established boards.
Yeah, especially if they have to travel a lot for those away series that can get expensive.
Exactly. So there are definitely strong arguments on both sides. I think the financial impact of this new format really depends on how it's all put into practice, by the ICC and by each individual cricket board.
Right. It's not a simple solution, but I think the author makes a really interesting case for change. He's saying, this format could breathe new life into Test cricket, make it more relevant and more engaging for fans, especially in a world where those shorter formats are becoming so dominant. What do you think? Is he right?
Well, I think we should really dig into his arguments and see if they hold up.
All right, let's do it. So first off, he says, this format would make Test cricket more competitive because every series has to have a winner, no more drawn series, every match counts. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's definitely true that drawn series can sometimes feel a little bit like a letdown, especially if it's part of a longer series where you already know who's going to win the whole thing.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier with those dead rubber matches.
Exactly. And by making sure there's a winner in every series, this format would definitely make each match more important. Every point you earn, every wicket you take could be the difference between, being promoted or relegated, or even making it to that World Test Championship final.
But wouldn't that also put a ton of pressure on the players, especially in those big playoff matches? I mean, the whole future of their team's test status could come down to one game.
Yeah, that's true. The pressure would be huge, and it might make teams play more defensively, trying to avoid making any big mistakes.
So it might make things more competitive, but the cricket itself might not be as exciting to watch.
Yeah, it's a trade-off for sure.
All right, so what about his argument that this new format would help those emerging test nations, move up in the rankings? Do you think that's realistic?
I think it definitely has potential. The promotion and relegation system creates a clear path for teams like Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Ireland to get into that top division, and by playing against those top teams regularly, they would get a lot of valuable experience.
But wouldn't they also need to invest a lot more, in their domestic cricket and in developing their young players to really be able to compete at that level?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just getting the chance to play against the best isn't enough. They need to have a strong foundation at home, too.
So this new format could be a good starting point, for those emerging nations to grow and develop, but it's not going to solve all their problems overnight.
Exactly. It's a step in the right direction, but it needs to be part of a bigger plan, with long-term investment in those countries' cricketing infrastructure.
Okay, so what about the scheduling issues? Test cricket is known for being, these really long series, lots of travel. How would this new format address that?
So the author's idea is to have a more flexible system where series can be 1, 3, or 5 matches long. So that gives you more options when you're making the schedule, You can accommodate the needs of different boards and players more easily.
But wouldn't that also kind of devalue Test cricket a little bit, Make it
Oh.
seem like you can just squeeze it in whenever it's convenient?
It's a risk, for sure, but the author's argument is that the matches themselves would be more important and more competitive now, and that would make up for any, perceived loss of prestige.
I guess it depends on whether the fans are willing to accept this new way of doing things, this more dynamic approach to scheduling.
Yeah, for sure. And finally, we come to the author's argument that this format would make Test cricket more popular with fans.
Well, I can definitely see how all the drama, the promotion and relegation battles, the do-or-die playoff matches, the constant changes in the rankings, that could definitely add a lot of excitement.
And the bonus points system, that could create some really interesting storylines within a series. Imagine a team that's already lost the series, but they're still fighting hard to get a bonus point for like a great individual performance or a come-from-behind win in one of the matches.
Yeah, that would definitely keep things interesting for the fan.
And then there's the rating system. It's constantly changing after every match. It's like watching a live leaderboard with teams moving up and down based on their latest results.
Like fantasy cricket, but in real life.
Exactly. And that kind of engagement could be huge for Test cricket, especially for attracting younger fans who are used to that fast-paced world of online sports and gaming.
So even though there are some valid concerns about this new format, it's clear the author has put a lot of thought into it. And he really believes it could revitalize Test cricket and make it more appealing to a wider audience.
He has, and it's a really intriguing idea, something that we should definitely be talking about, But at the end of the day, the success of any new format depends on the players, the boards, and most importantly, the fans.
And that's where you come in, dear listener. Now that you've heard all the arguments for and against this new World Test Championship format, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Would it make Test cricket more exciting and engaging for you?
What are your worries? What would you change? Tell us on social media, because this is a conversation that needs everyone involved if we want to make sure Test cricket has a bright future.
It's really kind of wild to think about. This whole thing is, like you said, shaking up the snow globe. We're so used to Test cricket being a certain way, and now someone's saying, hey, what if we just totally flip the script? It's making me look at the game in a whole new light,
It's a bold idea for sure, and I think even though we've talked about the good and the bad, the real test is going to be seeing it all play out. There's always a difference between how things look on paper and how they actually happen in the real world.
Yeah, totally. But I think that's part of what makes this whole deep dive so interesting. It's not just about understanding the rules of some new format. It's about sparking a conversation.
Yeah.
A debate, making people rethink what Test cricket is and what it could be in the future.
You got it. I think this new format, as crazy as it sounds, it forces us to ask some big questions about this game we love, like how do we keep the heart of Test cricket? The history, the little things that make it special, but also make it, fresh and exciting for today's world.
And how do we get a whole new generation of fans to fall in love with Test cricket, just like we did?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. I think for me, it's really shown how important it is to find that balance, you know, keeping the soul of Test cricket alive, but also finding ways to help it grow and adapt to how the world is changing.
It's a tough balancing act for sure, but what I love about this whole conversation is that there's no easy answer. It's something we all have to figure out together, the players, the people running the game, and the fans.
So what's your big takeaway from all this? What's that one thought you want to leave our listener with?
I think for me, it's this, whether this specific format happens or not, the future of Test cricket really comes down to us being open to change, challenging the way things have always been done and having honest conversations about what we want this game to be.
Couldn't have said it better myself, and I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. So to our listener, keep thinking, keep debating, and keep that love for Test cricket burning bright. Because in the end, it's that passion that's going to keep this amazing game alive for years to come.